Welcome, everyone. I am Dr. Deborah Fripp, the Executive Director of Teach the Shoah. And this is sharing their stories of Kristallnacht. Looked at through any filter, Kristallnacht is a watershed moment in history that merits both study and reflection. At Teach the Shoah, our tradition has become to confront the significance of Kristallnacht as part of our seasonal lecture series, because historical accuracy is a central pillar that anchors our mission to bear witness to the Shoah as storytellers. But it's different this year. This year, we know that this anniversary, it's the 85th, is unlike those that have come before. Our purpose is still the same, but since October 7th, we know this is a different world for us all. We are heartbroken by the horrific pogrom that occurred in Israel on the 7th of October and its aftermath. We regret that we have been forced into war. War is always a terrible thing. We are dismayed by the rising anti-Semitism we see around the world, and the feeling that the story of Kristallnacht is somehow more relevant than ever. So let us travel back in time to Germany and Austria in 1938 and tell that story. In a moment, I'm going to introduce you to Lynn Feldman, Teach the Shoah's Director of Holocaust Scholarship, who will be our guide for this journey.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening or this afternoon if you're in the US. I will be telling the story of Rabbi Oscar Werner. Oscar was born in Hanover, Germany, to Bernard and Sophie Werner, immigrants from Poland. Bernard and Sophie immigrated because they wanted to better their lives, and they did. They had a shop and a nice flat above the shop. And 10 years after they immigrated, Oscar was born. Oscar went to an old German school with other Jewish children the same age as him. He would have graduated from that school, only things changed for the Jews after the rise of the Nazis. When the Numerus Clausus Act came out, when Jewish students and pupils could no longer attend all German schools, Oscar and his other Jewish friends had to leave. Oscar was sent to Frankfurt to study in a Jewish school. But some of his friends were sent all over the place. Like his friend Herschel, he was sent to Paris. It suited Oscar's parents that he went to a Jewish school now. And as he grew up, by the age of 16, he was eligible to enter the yeshiva college, which he did. His friend Herschel went to an art school in Paris. But things got worse and worse for the Jews in Germany. And in 1938, there was a new act. All Jews who were not German nationals had to leave. Oscar's parents packed their bags and made their way to the Polish border. It was fine for them to go back to Poland. They had family there. They knew where to go and what to do. Only the Polish government ended up closing the border, not letting anybody in. Oscar's parents, like 30,000 other Jews, found themselves in no man's land, in this tiny village called Zabonshyn, which is in between Germany and Poland. And there was nothing there. So from the tiny town, suddenly there's a camp of refugees intense. Oscar, who was in Frankfurt at the time, decides that he wants to join his family. He wants to be with them. He's visited Poland before. That'll be fine. So he takes the train to Zabonchin on a Friday morning. And when he gets to this makeshift camp, the German guard at the entrance stops and says to him, "Show me your Polish passport." And Oscar says, "I don't have a passport with me, but my parents are there." "No, you're German. You can't go in." Oscar gets sent to jail. He spends Shabbos in jail. After Shabbos, he gets released. And he goes back to Frankfurt, to the yeshiva. A few weeks by, he can correspond with his parents, and he does. One day, a friend of Oscar says to him, "Say, do you have photos of you and your pal Herschel?" And Oscar says, "Yes, why?" And his friend says, "Get rid of them. You don't want to be associated with him." Oscar tries to figure out why. And then he finds out that his friend, little Herschel Grinchpan, tries to assassinate a German diplomat in Paris. Oscar throws away the photos. But the result of that attempt that his pal did, that came quite soon. Oscar decides he's going to go back to his house in Hanover. And on the night of the 9th of November, he's in his flat when he hears a terrible explosion. He hears glass breaking, he hears screaming and shouting, but he stays inside. He doesn't really know what's happening. But in the morning, everything seems quiet. So Oscar decides that he's going to go and check on the shop downstairs, see what's happened. Maybe the glass that he heard that broke wasn't from his family shop. He also wants to go and see his shul, his synagogue. That's the great synagogue of Hanover. He goes downstairs and all the windows of the shop, they're all smashed, and everything it was looted, it was broken, it was dirty, it was chaos. He goes over to the shul. This is the same shul he went to every Shabbos, every Yom Tov. This is where he was bar mitzvah. Great, beautiful synagogue. So elegant. Now, he's standing in front of rubble. Stones. Broken stones. Broken glass. He contacts his parents. He tells them what happened. And his parents say to him, "Leave. Leave Germany." Oscar's almost 17, but somehow he manages to get himself onto the Kindertransport list. Thank you. Deborah, can we have our slides, please? So, before we actually start discussing Kristallnacht itself, or the November pogrom, as we call it today in research, I'd like to take us a bit before November of 1938. There are many different events that lead us up into this point in time where everything kind of explodes, right, with Kristallnacht. We have obviously the rise of the Nazis, we have different boycotts, we have laws, all sorts. The world, as well as the Jewish community within Germany, which, by the way, as the Jewish community in Germany on the same year as the Nazis' rise was 0.8 of the total people in Germany, not even 1%, 0.8. But the Jewish community and the world seems to realize that things are not going so well for Jews. And we need to find a solution for the Jewish problem, quote unquote. So President Franklin D. Roosevelt decides that we as the West, as the world, need to get together and think about what we're going to do. So in July 1938, in France, in Avion, there is a conference where many different heads of state come to discuss what we're going to do with Jewish refugees. And 32 countries attend this conference. Big countries. I mean, the US, obviously, Great Britain, France, Canada, most of the democratic countries join in. But none of the 38 countries who came together in this conference are willing to take in Jewish German refugees. It goes to the extent that the Australian delegation turns around and says, we don't have anti-Semitism in Australia. We're not going to import this problem. So most of the countries will not accept any Jewish refugees. But there is one country that says, yes, we'll take in a few, and that's the Dominican Republic, a tiny, tiny country in the West Indies. They volunteer to take in the Jews, but they also want to be paid for this. They want all these other big democracies to give money for their republic to take in the Jews. So that's yet another plan that doesn't work. And at this point, the world basically is saying, so there's a few refugees, that's fine. What's the worst that could happen? Could we move to the next slide? So as we heard in the story of Rabbi Werner, the Germans decide, the German government, the Nazi German government decides, enough's enough. I mean, we've got this 0.8% Jewish population here, but we also have over 30,000 Jews in this country that are not German nationals, right? They weren't born here, they immigrated here. We don't want them. Thank you and goodbye. So on October 27th, 1938, the decree comes out that all of the Polish national Jews need to leave Germany immediately. And they do. They try, they pack their bags, and they go towards the Polish border. The Poles, on the other hand, are saying, yeah, y'all had this conference a while ago, and you did not accept the Jews. We're not taking them back. They left. They chose not to live in Poland anymore. We don't want this responsibility. And they close off their borders, literally putting police, military, whatever, stopping people from crossing over. These 30,000 Jews end up in this no man's land, and they are there for months. This goes well over November pogrom. This continues until January 1939. Most people who had family, relatives outside of Germany and Poland managed to go to wherever, but the majority were left there. The Red Cross comes to visit, all sorts of Jewish organizations come in, check on the Jews there. They send humanitarian aid. They bring whatever supplies that can be flown in from either the US or from Canada. Organizations like EVO send all sorts of people to document what's happening to these refugees that are stuck in between two countries. The photos that we have here in front of us are from this kind of report that EVO came back with, explaining that, you know, there's not a lot there. It's basically tents and a few buildings that could be turned into makeshift residential areas. Could we move to the next slide? One of the families that end up together with the Werner family, the Oscar's parents, is the Grinchpan family. Their son Herschel, who was indeed sent to France to study, they get a letter from Herschel saying that this is unacceptable and he is going to be taking action and he is going to be doing something. And he does. He thinks in his mind that if this young 17-year-old boy, will go and try to assassinate a German diplomat in Paris, then the world will pay attention and something will happen, something will change. His parents could go home, maybe. So his plan didn't work, and he was immediately arrested. A little side note, because we're not going to return to Grinchpan for the rest of the evening, I will tell you that Herschel Grinchpan was the most protected Jew during the Holocaust. He awaited trial for years. He was trialed, but towards the end of the war. During the whole war, he was not in camps. He was in a prison, kept healthy, kept clean, with food rations and everything. Of course, at the end, he was found guilty of the murder of the diplomat and was hung for it. But for the time that he was kept in prison, he was the most protected Jew. If we could move on to the next slide. So our next storyteller is Dr. Mehek Borza, who's the head of Global Holocaust and Religious Studies at the Global Center of Religious Research in the United States. She's passionate about the Holocaust, obviously, and her knowledge about and bringing in the knowledge of the Holocaust in India. And she finds storytelling, of course, very important. Mehek is going to be telling us the story of Rita Cohen's story. This is the point of view of a little girl and her dilemma, being the witness in firsthand of the act of Kristallnacht. Mehek, whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Lynn. I was born in Berlin on November 29th, 1927. I was about 5 years old when Hitler came to power. And 2 years later, in 1934, I went to a neighborhood school. As far as I know, it was a German school. And I think I went there till 1937. My mother was not Jewish before she married my father, but then she converted. So, all four of us, my parents, me, and my brother, born 2 years later, were registered as Jews. Well, we were considered Jews according to the Nuremberg laws. And my mother, even though she was Jewish, by religion, was still considered an Aryan by the Nazis. During my school days, I remember one incident distinctly. I used to play on the street with other children, and some boys one day asked me to say something in Hebrew. And all I knew was the Shema and a few blessings that I had managed to pick up. And I didn't want to say them. So I told the boys, I can't. I really can't say because they are sacred. You know what they did? They just pushed me into a corner and said, we'll beat you up if you don't. And so I had to. One day, I was on my way to school, and I remember this very clearly. I walked a few blocks from my home, and I didn't notice anything. It was a usual normal day, so I thought it was just quiet, like just another day. But then I turned into the main street. The main street had a lot of Jewish stores. And the minute I turned into the main street, I noticed that the windows were smashed. The glass was lying on the street. Some of the goods were just lying scattered here and there. And what I still remember, almost visually, was the writing. On the glass that was not broken yet, or on the walls next to the store, was written the word Jew, and then the star. What struck me then and really impressed me was that they were written in red letters. It was almost as if blood was dripping. I walked on and I saw more and more stars and writings on both sides of the street. I was frightened. I was bewildered. I didn't know what to do. I just didn't know what to do. I walked on maybe 13, 14 blocks because I had to get to my school. A couple of blocks before I reached my school, two of my classmates came running up to me and said, "Don't go any further." Then I noticed there were talks in hushed tones about synagogue burning. I said, "Is our synagogue burning?" I couldn't understand it myself. And I said again, "Our synagogue is burning." Then, all of a sudden, it dawned upon me that there was a certain connection between the scenes that I had just witnessed and the synagogue burning. Something in me snapped at that point. I started yelling to the few people that were there on the streets. I started yelling, "Our synagogue is burning." And they just looked away. And then I went home. I turned around and went home. That's the memory I have of war breaking out. Soon after, my parents started panicking. They just felt the need to save us. And the plan that they hit on was to get us baptized. I fought it with tooth and nail. And I said, "I will never become a Christian." But my father continued to persuade me in a loving way. And I said to my father, "You know, God will never forgive me." But he said, "Well, he will understand. You don't have to accept it in your heart. God knows what's going on." and he'll forgive you. And eventually, I accepted it. Me and my brother were baptized.
Hack, that was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we've heard two stories, and we're going to have a little poetic interlude. I'd like to introduce Cantor Karen Weber, who is going to be reading us, citing her poem.
Thank you, Lynn. This poem was created especially for this commemoration today, and it is a look at the Kristallnacht from the point of view of a bird called a nightjar. Nightjars fly at night. They are brown-gray. They blend in with the trees they sit on, and they fly all night, and they cover lots of sky. Crystal nightjar flight. The moon calls me harbinger of bad luck, then covers her eyes. But this night, the bad, the horrid, has already arrived. Unholy light rises from choking synagogues, fluttering, folding like paper lanterns. Winging over Aachen, Bamberg, Berlin, I watch policemen watch firemen stoke fires. Brown shirts dump holy books to piles, and with quick smiles flick a match. Crowds cheer, circle the rubble, dancing faster and faster. Stray embers sweep, singe my tail feathers. Moaning A minor chord drops from the organ as the braided flame climbs the parochet with a grapevine step. The balcony plummets to the bima's lap. Sterling Kiddush cups fly through red-blue stained glass windowless windows. On this night of a million cuts, a Jewish teen flies the back door, down the alleyway, onto his bicycle, pedaling faster than he ever has, while a Torah, undressed, shivers on the curb. Finally, daybreak. The wind has lost her tongue, and I my trill. Just a breathless corpse fowl pinned to a gray-brown branch. As the Maccabee daughters returned to the ancient temple, brooms in hand, so too Jewish women kneel with dustpans in gray morning light. Our battered Lady Jerusalem lifts her head to spit out the last of her teeth. Miles of open windows gape at white feathers sliced from beds, fused to glass with blood. I fly blind now, a witness. I cannot unsee what I've seen. The pale sun slips to the pavement.
Thank you, Karen. That was beautiful. Could we have our slides, please? Thank you. So, before Mehek and Karen, we discussed Herschel Grinchban. So, while Nazi propaganda claimed that Kristallnacht, the November pogrom, was a spontaneous outburst of rage for this attempted murder, this was actually planned and implemented by the highest ranking people in the Nazi Party, by the leadership. The signal was given by the Minister of Propaganda, Joseph Goebbels, and it was carried out by members of the Nazi regime. Can we move one slide? During the pogrom, which took place on the night between the 9th and the 10th of November 1938, members of the party, as well as their military force, the youth movements, went around breaking, burning, looting, and parading the Jews around the different towns, both in Germany and in Austria, which at this point was already part of the Reich. It was annexed earlier that year. Could we move a slide, please? What we're looking at right now is a photo from an album that was found at the beginning of this year. This album was hidden in somebody's attic quite randomly and was found and given to Yad Vashem. And it shows us never before seen photos of actual high-ranking officers, which we can see here, going in not just to synagogues and shops, but also people's homes and wrecking them, vandalizing them, for no real reason. I mean, it's not like they're looking for something specific. This is just to cause as much havoc as possible. Can we move one slide? And this is also from that same album. I'm sorry to say I could not bring more photos. They are not age appropriate, but this is what was done in houses, in synagogues, in shops, and in the streets. In total, more than 1,400 synagogues around the Reich, which is Germany and Austria, were vandalized, burnt, broken, and so on. This was the first time that 91 Jews were murdered for being Jews, not for any specific reason, in the streets. And also, this is the first time that looting happened without any kind of rhyme or reason. Could we move one slide, please? And what we're looking at is ruins of a synagogue. And in the second photo, this is the aftermath. It was not enough for the Nazi Party to cause this pogrom. They also made the Jewish communities, both in Germany and in Austria, they made the Jewish communities pay to fix up shop fronts, to clean the streets from the glass and the rubble from all the broken synagogues. Basically, the Jews had to pay the Germans for creating a pogrom. In addition to this terrible situation and the 91 murdered Jews, this was the first time that Jews were imprisoned in camps for being Jewish. People were sent into camps, which were a form of the Nazi rehabilitation system, which is a fancy word for labor camps and prisons. But on the night of Kristallnacht, Jews were imprisoned for being Jews, and they were sent off not necessarily to a camp nearby. Some German Jews found themselves in Austria, some Austrian Jews found themselves in Germany. If we could move on slide. Our next story will be told by Joel. Joel Loeb's mother and father were both victims of the Holocaust. His mother, Lisa Joseph Laub, was a child passenger on the MS St. Louis, the last ship out of Hamburg. 6 months before, on November 10th, Liesel experienced the horrors of Kristallnacht. Joel will help you witness the event through the eyes of his mother, who was a 10-year-old child at the time. Joel, whenever you're ready.
We had a party last night. It was my father's birthday, November 9th. Just now, there was a big knocking on the door. Brown shirts, stormtroopers. I was answering the door. What's going on here? Did you have a party last night? Are you celebrating something? No, we celebrated Sep's birthday. It was a special birthday. We had a little family here and a little celebration. We did have a nice party. My cousin Gunther was here. He's my favorite. They're so scary, those guys. I just stay quiet. Mama got rid of them. She told them, and they left. Daddy's not here. He's at work. Even the man who rents our upstairs isn't home. I think he's coming back later. Later on. We hear all kinds of noises, sirens, everything's going crazy. Somebody's crashing through the window in my grandmother's bedroom. Mama's grabbing me by the wrist. Come on, Liebchen, we have to go upstairs. You have to be very quiet. Stay very still. She takes me to the closet upstairs. We're very quiet, and I hear all kinds of noise downstairs, crashing and books coming down. All the glassware is getting destroyed. Oh, my piano. Sounds like my piano fell down. I'm so scared. I gotta be quiet. They've been here before. They're not good people. Our renter showed up. He came out. He went downstairs. You keep your shenanigans to the first floor. There's no Jewish people up here. Nobody that lives on the second floor except me. They left. We're going downstairs. Oh my gosh. Everything is destroyed. Books all over the floor. All the china and glassware and oh, my piano. Piano has a hole in it. Just went up to grandma's room. They crashed through the window. They went through the window and slashed the bed. If she had been there, she'd be dead. They hate us. Mom is trying to find Daddy. They took Daddy to jail. Mama said they also took some of the people, some of the men to other places. I wonder if Gunther is in the place. Where did all the people go? We looked outside. Our synagogue is on fire. Will I ever be able to go back to school? I don't think so. My teacher, I love him so much. Mama says we're going to have to leave our lives. They're going to change forever.
We'll take a breather and we'll go back to our slides. In May 1939, the German liner St. Louis sailed from Hamburg, Germany to Havana, Cuba. On board were 937 passengers. Almost all of them were Jewish refugees. Cuba's government then refused to allow the ship to dock. The United States and Canada both were unwilling to take in the passengers. And the St. Louis passengers, when they were finally allowed to go back towards Western Europe, sailed back, not to Germany, but to then still free Western Europe. 254 passengers from the St. Louis died in the Holocaust. The rest managed to survive, like Joel's mother. May we move on? So another breather before our next story. Our next storyteller is our own president of Teach the Shoah, Dr. Deborah Fripp. Deborah, whenever you're ready.
You've got to get out of here. They're all going to be arrested again. My wife has just run across the street to the bunker, to the basement where I'm hiding. How can I get out of here? We're not ready. I don't have. Across the street, a crowd of people has gathered in front of the Gestapo building. People like me who are supposed to report into the Gestapo every morning. People who apparently are waiting to get arrested again, although they don't know it. The street is full of the sound of breaking glass, of people screaming and shouting. Hamburg is burning. I can't let myself get arrested again. I know what these people are capable of. I will never forget the casual murder of an old man with a Nazi boot on his neck because he couldn't run. His name was Solomon. I have to get out of here. But in truth, I do have. We have reservations on the Holland America line. That's how my wife got me out of prison, with the promise that we would leave Germany. I just have to get to Amsterdam. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, I'm on a train to Amsterdam. As we approach the Dutch border, a Dutch police officer comes into the compartment. Passports, please. I hand him my passport with some trepidation, as there is a great big J stamped in red on the first page of my passport. He takes it, opens it, looks at it. Where are you headed? To Amsterdam. He nods, hands it back to me, and moves on. It can't be that easy, can it? But no, it can't. Because a few minutes later, a pair of black-shirted Gestapo come into the compartment. Passports, please. Oh, a Jew. You're running away from something. You didn't report into the Gestapo this morning. Where are you coming from? Hamburg. You didn't report in this morning. You're running away. Get off at Oldenzaal. Oldenzaal, the last station in Germany before we crossed the Dutch border. I am not getting off at Oldenzaal. I don't care. They can, if they kill me, they kill me. I am not getting off this train. We roll into the station at Oldenzaal. We're supposed to be here for 5 minutes. One minute. Two minutes. Each minute is an eternity. 5 minutes is endless. Five minutes. The train starts to roll. And rolls to a stop. The Gestapo burst into the compartment. We told you to get off at Oldenzaal. Don't give us any excuses. They pick me up and throw me out the window onto the platform. I'm held, searched, strip searched everywhere. There's something wrong here, they keep saying. You didn't report in this morning. You're running away from something. We're going to call Hamburg. Whether they call Hamburg or not, I don't know. At midnight, they let me go. I'm allowed to get on another train, make my way to Amsterdam, where I wait for my wife and our toddler and our brand new baby to board that Holland America line across the ocean to safety.
Oof. Thank you, Deborah. That was beautiful. Okay, let's go back to our slide, last slide. So, Kristallnacht happens. 91 Jews die, 1,400 synagogues are burnt and broken and shattered, and 30,000 Jews are imprisoned. The only way out of these camps is if the imprisoned man and his family actually have visas, valid visas, to another country. But where do you go? We've already heard at the conference that was earlier that year that nowhere in the world will take them. But some countries did agree, because some countries accepted children. In the story of Oscar Werner at the beginning of our evening, he tells us that he has made it onto the list for the Kindertransport. Those were over 10,000 Jewish children who left Germany, Austria, and Bohemia, today the Czech Republic, to England. England took in children from infants up to the age of 17. So the Kindertransport continues between 1938 till 1940, till the end of 1940, when it wasn't possible anymore. So that was one means of leaving. Some people, part of the intelligentsia, left because they were offered positions either in universities abroad or hospitals if they were doctors and so on. Some, very few, managed to get certificates to come to mandatory Palestine, the Yishuv, to Israel. So approximately 282,000 Jews managed to immigrate before the outbreak of war from Germany, and approximately 117,000 Jews managed to immigrate from Austria, which left very similar numbers still in these both countries. In Germany, there were about 202,000 Jews left by the outbreak of war, and in Austria, about 57,000 Jews were left. What happens to those Jews? That's for another program. That's for when we discuss what happens after the outbreak of war. But as Chaim Weizmann, who was the head of the Jewish Agency at the time, said, there are in this part of the world, that's Eastern and Central Europe, 6 million Jews for whom the world is divided into places where they cannot live and places where they cannot enter. Thank you, everyone. This concludes the section of our evening. All the photos that were used today in our presentation were taken from both the Yad Vashem archives and the USHMM archives. Our storytellers, I'd like to thank you all for the hard work that you've put in to learning your stories, to telling your stories. None of these stories were read. These are all oral storytelling. And Kanta Karen, thank you so much for your amazing poem. We shall now open for a round of questions and answers. If you could please write your questions in the chat and we will pick them up. You can direct your questions to myself or to any of the storytellers.
Thank you, Lynn, so much for, for that amazing presentation. We always learn so much from you. So as Erica says, please drop questions in the chat and we'll take some. Have you got any other tidbits that you did include that you would like to tell us about?
Sure. So Kristallnacht is a very unique point in time for the German Jews and for the Austrian Jews. Because even though we see from 1933, from the rise of the Nazi Party up until November of 1938, we see this kind of progression of worsening the conditions for the Jewish communities. Most of this was done through legislation like the Nuremberg laws or through their attempted boycott of the 1st of April 1933. That was a failed boycott. But we don't see anything that is physical in a way. So, you know, Jews were sent to these camps. The first camp, Dachau, was created in 1933. We do find Jews there, but they're not sent because they're Jews. They're sent because of maybe their political views, or maybe afterwards, after the blood laws come out, because they refuse to divorce an Aryan woman. But Kristallnacht becomes this turning point. It becomes this point where the Jews realize this is not safe anymore. So yes, there were Jews who already in the early 30s, even before the Nuremberg laws, kind of pause for a minute and say, this doesn't look like it's going to end well for us, and we better leave. But for most of the Jewish community, especially in Germany, the Jews are very assimilated and acculturated, and you know they're very German, and they're proud to be German. Many of them served in the German army during the Great War at the time, because there wasn't another war yet, and they kept thinking, politics, it'll blow over, you know, like say he was elected, and in a few years somebody else will be elected and we'll forget about all of this. But after Kristallnacht, there's no longer this perception of, oh, things are going to get better. No, now we know things are going to get worse. And this is when we start seeing these big projects like the Kindertransport, or the escape of the mines, the intelligentsia that kind of tries to find their positions outside of Germany and Austria. So this is, I mean, we don't go very in depth because our program is very much storytelling orientated. And I always believe that when we hear a personal story, that brings us closer to understanding much more than if I just sit here and give you a full history lecture. But it is important to understand that this is the turning point for the German Jews.
Thank you. So we've got a couple of questions in the chat. The first one I will take actually, because this is a question from Erica. Thank you, Erica. Can anyone be a storyteller? How do you start? And do you have to have a family story? So the first is anyone can be a storyteller. Anyone. We have had people who have no experience. We have people who have lots of experience. Anyone can be a storyteller. We're true believers in that. You do not have to have a family story. I do not have a family story. Jennifer does not have a family story. Many of us, Mehek does not have a family story. Many of us don't. And we encourage you to come and learn from us if you do have a family story, but we encourage you just as much if you don't, because there are many, many stories out there that need to be told. How do you start? You come to our programs. I'm going to tell you in a little bit when we finish the Q&A about a program that we're going to have in early December, which is an introductory workshop. And that's how you start. You come to one of our introductory workshops, which gives you a taste of what it feels like to start working with these stories. And if you think it's something that you want to keep doing, then we have classes and the like that you can take. Question from Alan Cohen, Lynn. Can you say briefly how people like Alan's mother and Oscar managed to get on the Kindertransport? And if you have any idea if there were many who wanted to get on who couldn't, that's another interesting question.
Okay, so thank you so much, Alan, for asking that. So the British government decided that they would only take in children because that did not pose any kind of threat on the British economy in a way. So the first transport that leaves in 1938 leaves with just under 1,000 children. Actually, it's 998, but I'm a stickler for numbers. And the British government, as well as British families and we should say also manners and all sorts of industries, realized that this is working for them. So they kept upping the amount of children that were allowed in. We don't really know of a great deal of people who wanted to get onto the Kindertransport and couldn't. We do know that the age limit became an issue because the cutoff age was 17. So if somebody was 17 in 2 weeks, they could not go. And that became a bit of an issue for the ones who did want to join this thing. But the whole concept of the Kindertransport brings us to what we call in Holocaust research the choiceless choices, because nobody really knew where things were going. And one of the concerns were, if you're sending an infant and a family in England adopts them, what happens afterwards? Can you get the child back? There's all these big questions that came up. Also, what happens if, the child survives because they're in England, but their family doesn't because they didn't get to go with them? So there's all these different emotional things that come up when the Kindertransport is discussed. But the way onto the list was through usually the British Foreign Office together with the Jewish Agency that came up with these lists. Jewish communities within rabbis and different leaders sometimes did help with that as well, just adding names onto lists. And at the end, 10,000 children were saved that way.
I imagine.
There were also, so I do want to say there were also other programs that saved Jewish children from Germany that were not through the Kindertransport. They didn't necessarily end up in England, or if they did end up in England, it came through a different route.
Yes, I believe Dr. Ruth's story, she ended up in Switzerland, I believe, on a similar kind of program. I imagine the problem that you were suggesting of the kids surviving when the parents didn't must have happened a great deal, that there must have been a lot of children on the Kindertransport who were in that situation. What did they end up doing?
So it really depends. A lot of them end up just staying in Britain, where I'm partially Scottish. So in Scotland, there were quite a few. Well, when I was growing up, there were already grandparents, but there were a lot of Kindertransport people within the Jewish community, and I have the honor of knowing a Kindertransport survivor who is still with us, and he comes to give testimony at Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. And he is the sole survivor of his family. So he ended up living in England well into the 60s, gets married, and then decides that he actually wants to live in Israel, makes Aliyah. His children, grandchildren, and now great-grandchildren all live here. So we have all sorts. Some come here, some immigrate afterwards to other countries. We know of Kindertransport children who end up afterwards in Australia and New Zealand and in the US and Canada, everywhere.
Yes, yes. So we wanted to ask the storytellers and our poet in residence to tell us a little bit about what it was that they were hoping most people would get out of their stories. What our storytelling director likes to call our most important thing. So I'm going to start with Joel and add him as a spotlight. Joel, you want to tell us a little bit about what your most important thing was?
Yes. My most important thing from this snippet of a much bigger story is the terror. And my mother was a brave little girl. I mean, her life changed at this event. But in 1933, when things started going badly in Germany, where signs started going up in the parks, she was very aware of what was going on, and she was yet very protected. She had a nanny, and her nanny's husband, both Christian people that were very protective of her, and went to her public school at the time and told them that people were making fun of her and they needed to stop. I mean, they went out of their way. So she had a lot of examples of good people that tried to protect them. And yet on this one, and she was very attached to her father, who was everything was okay when her daddy was around. And he was a lawyer. He was also a lawyer for Joseph Goebbels, who was, they were both from the same town earlier in his career. So he knew a lot more of what was going on than many people. And they had started the process already of trying to get out. But that one night of horror was her initiation to not being a child anymore. And even though her mother and father worked to keep her safe always, it was the beginning of the end of her childhood. After that, she was moved to Bonn and went to a Jewish school there as long as she could. And then they had tickets for the St. Louis. And that in itself is its own story. My grandfather was the chairman of the passenger committee that was formed by a very decent captain who wanted to make sure that people heard news from Jewish people and not from the German sort of military folks that were piloting the ship. Her records are very detailed, and from the time that she was on that ship, I believe she dedicated her life to telling the story. So it's my job because I grew up with it. There's a book, Voyage of the Damned. I have my copy right here. Jennifer has the copy there.
Well, hold up your copy because the recording isn't going to record Jennifer. So yes, yes, thank you.
Much as I can. And it was instilled in me in such an early age that it filled me with fear that I lived with for the rest of my life. And until I started telling the story, which was a couple years ago, I had to work through a lot of issues just to be able to get rid of my emotions so that I could talk about her emotions. So yeah, that's my journey and that's her journey.
There are many stories in there, and we have been privileged to hear several of them, and at some point we will have a chance to hear more of them in these sorts of contexts. Thank you, Joel. Mehek, would you like to come on and talk to us about the story you told?
Thanks, Deborah. I mean, I have had the privilege of being mentored by two of the very, what I can say is they're fantastic mentors, Jennifer and Lynn. So thank you for that. And I have started since I became a storyteller, which I didn't know I was one when I began the journey. So it's been definitely a long journey from a naive, just a assistant professor of English literature, just talking. And then, you shift your entire teaching method to storytelling and you start noticing how kids connect so well. So for me, I mean, storytelling is such an important medium. And I also pursue the case for it being in the mainstream, in the main academia. So one thing is there, you immediately form that connect with your audience while you're narrating a story. You bring the pages to life. You bring the emotions. It's a journey from apathy to empathy and sympathy, I would say. And then for this particular story, when I read the entire story as the PDF, and when I heard her interview, so for me, it was that shift in the emotion when she's asked to be, to get baptized. It was almost like that 5 phases of grief. You pass that 5 stages of grief. The first is denial. She denies, I'll not convert. And then she's angry at her father. And then she bargains that, please let me just continue being a Jew. And then she undergoes, a sad phase, a depressive phase, and then finally she accepts. So that, the major change in the emotion was what I wanted to focus on, highlight on, and I wanted to get that point across to my audience.
I think that came across in the earlier part as well, of the coming into Kristallnacht and the piece, the emotions of what am I seeing and what am I seeing and what am I seeing? I mean, that you
When
did.
she sees the synagogue burning, she
Yeah.
almost utters the words unknowingly. And after she utters, she then realizes what she has said. And then she repeats it. She keeps on repeating it and she can't take that shock in.
Yeah.
And she's doubly shocked that people are not responding. And she says, I'm just yelling that our synagogue is burning. And you know what they did? They just looked away. So
Thank you, Mehak.
as Lynn said, choiceless choices. So,
Yes, yes,
Absolutely.
thank you. Karen, come talk to us about this really amazing poem that you wrote for us for this program.
Sure, I'm happy to. When I create a poem, it's often just something that I get out of the air or in a book or a newspaper article. But when one is charged with creating a poem for a commemoration, for an exact date, it's a little bit different. And a lot of us have been raised with a lot of factoids over the years about Kristallnacht. So I wanted to take a different way in. I wanted to take an unexpected way in. And it came to me. It's going to be from the point of view of a bird and the way a bird sees, so that we can pull back all your stories, Mehak, and Joel were very specific, and very often the camera was right there with us. I wanted to create something in which the camera could be very, very, very far back and up, and then whoosh, zoom in on the boy running away on his bicycle, and we hope he gets away. He was like a little ray of hope. So I think that for me, it's about images. The way I write is I just key into these images that float up as I think about each of these things. And of course, we had them on the slides with Lynn. We had them in the, shown and depicted and talked around and through the stories. But I wanted to, I guess, have surrealistic images, images of things you wouldn't normally, the Torah's on the curb and she's undressed. And then taken other, it's also such a big poem. These are such huge moments with the Maccabees and coming in after the temple is destroyed. And also Lady Jerusalem, broken and bent and just, sooted up with no teeth and just spitting out her teeth at the end there. And so I wove in those surrealistic pieces. So if you have any questions, that's
It was beautiful.
thank you.
Thank you.
The explanation was as beautiful.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you very much.
Deborah, I know it's Jennifer, a disembodied voice. Thank you, Karen. I just wanted to give Deborah a chance to also answer, and Lynn a chance, because they are also storytellers in addition to leaders of our organization. So would love, as time allows, would love to hear from each of you a little bit of answering those questions. And Karen, Mehak, and Joel, your answers were truly extensions of who you are and how you see and live. Very beautiful.
Thank you, Jennifer. So Lynn, you want to talk to us about that story? That story was for you very unusual. Why don't you tell us why?
So I don't usually tell our own family stories, but this is the story of my mother, who's here in the Zoom. My mother's great cousin, Oscar, and he gave testimony. He was a great rabbi. He, as I said, he ended up in the kinder transport, but he didn't stay in England. And the last years of his life he spent in the US, where he founded the Etz Chaim congregation. And he had his children and grandchildren are with us. So he has an amazing family. And I only just discovered this year his testimony. And as I heard the testimony, I was like, oh, Kristallnacht story. So that's how we came here. My MIT, my most important thing in the story of his was not just his connection with Herschel Grinchpan, but it was the lead up to Kristallnacht more than Kristallnacht itself. Which is why also that was the first story. I usually, if I do tell a story, I don't run the program at the same time, but this time we made a bit of an exception.
Yeah.
And that's it. I just, I hope I did him proud up there. So Deborah, over to you.
Yeah, so that story, there's a lot of pieces to that story that I didn't get to tell, but the key piece is you know, he had been in prison, and as I said, he got out of prison with the promise that they would leave Germany, but having a visa, having tickets, that wasn't enough, right? You had to also get out. And getting out wasn't necessarily so easy. I mean, there was a piece of the story that I didn't get to tell, that they had reservations on the Holland America line, but they didn't actually have the tickets yet. And that day, they couldn't pay for the tickets because everything had been confiscated and they had no money left. So his wife had to make some phone calls to some people that she knew, some business people who dealt with paying for the tickets and got the tickets paid for so that they could leave. But even having the tickets, that's not enough. You got to get out of the country. And the whole story of sort of almost getting out, and then actually getting out, you know, that there's this really unexpected moment there where he's been arrested again, and then they just let him go. And he manages to get out. So yeah, my most important thing there was, you know, just how hard it is to get out. That the Germans kept saying, you know, we want all the Jews to leave, but then they didn't actually want to let them out.
Yeah, the Germans made things difficult either way.
Yes. So thank you, everybody, all the storytellers, for your comments. Lynn, we do have one more question. We may have more. We have another question from the chat that I do think it's worth addressing. It's a slightly difficult question. Devorah Montal wants to know, with everything going on now, is history repeating itself, or are things somehow different now? With your historian hat on, can you give us some thoughts?
So it's not the same. What happened on the 7th of October is horrific. Pogrom, massacre, many words can describe it. But history is not repeating itself in the sense that as long as there is a state of Israel, there can't be another Holocaust. Of course, we can never say never. I'm not a prophet. I wish I had the gift of prophecy, but it is my belief that the actions that we are seeing and the situation is very different. We need to remember that when the Holocaust happened, or even Kristallnacht, right? Let's not go to the big stuff, just Kristallnacht. It happened when there wasn't a state. There was nowhere to go, which is why the Avian conference is, you know, it's insanity when we think about it. I mean, obviously, the 38 countries who were sitting in that meeting did not know what was going to happen within a year. But the fact was nobody wanted it. And as Chaim Weizmann said, you know, 6 million Jews could go nowhere and could leave nowhere, right? Today, we have a state. And this is where This is our safe haven, although it didn't feel very safe on the 7th of October. Today, even though when our program started, I had to disappear because there was sirens and rockets fired at us. But Baruch Hashem, we're fine and we're here and we'll continue to be here. So it's not the same. That was my very long and convoluted way of saying it's not the same.
Not the same. So I know we have more questions, but it is 3:30. I'm sorry. It is, yes, what, I don't know what time it is actually there. I'm in Singapore.
Well, it is like
2:30.
9:30.
So it's 2:30 in the US, I guess. And I think we need to close out. Oh, yes, and Dr. Burza is in India. I want to thank all the storytellers. I'm going to take off the spotlights here for a minute because I want to bring up our slides just momentarily so I can show you this. Erica put this in the chat, but we're having another program on December 4th. It's one of these programs I was talking about earlier. It's an introduction to Holocaust storytelling. We will have a story as part of it, but we'll also have a chance to actually try out storytelling for yourself. It's a wonderful program. I highly recommend it. So the Erica put the link in the chat, but it's also here. So I hope you will join us. So with that, I'm going to stop the share and turn it over to Jennifer to lead us back out of our space.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being so present. Thank you to my colleagues, Deborah and Lynn. This could not happen without your expertise and all the time and energy and care you put into this. Thank you to my other colleagues, fellow storytellers, poets, Karen, Mahak, Joel, and of course, again, Deborah and Lynn. And I want to give a really special thanks to our board member, Erica, who is, I can never say the name correctly, Guerra, I hope I'm saying it correctly, who has done so much work behind the scenes. She's just an incredible communications and marketing executive, and we're so happy to have her as part of today's event and of our organization in general. So let us take a deep breath, and this will be a little shorter than the one starting, but we want to just bring you, as we say, safely in and safely out. So if you want to turn off your cameras, you can. It's up to you. And I invite you again to close your eyes if you wish and to follow my voice as you wish or go into your own space. So let's take a deep breath. And know that today, tonight, all of us performed a sacred task. We listened. We were present. We were ourselves as individuals and also part of a community. There's so little we feel we can do in these challenging, painful times, and yet there is so much we can do. And we can each feel the appreciation for ourselves and one another that we chose to use our time to witness these stories. Thank you for being a witness. Thank you for being someone with an open heart. Thank you for your presence. So let's take a deep breath. Let it out with a sigh if you'd like. And as you leave our space, carry all that was helpful to you with you into your day or into your evening. And all that you need to let go, you have permission. You don't have to carry all of the burden all of the time. We're all here to help each other. Let go of what you need to let go of from your body, from your spirit, and hold on to all you wish to hold. If you're going off to bed, have sweet dreams, a restful sleep. And if you're going into your day, Go knowing that you can move on to the next thing, and we will be with you in your heart as you are in ours. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. And with that, we will say good night, or as Jennifer said, good day, whatever time it is for you. I hope the rest of your day or evening is wonderful.